My name is Claire Morgan. I'm 36. For 5 years, I paid my parents' mortgage on the house I grew up in, believing it would one day be mine. But at my sister's wedding, my father stood up and said, "We've decided to give the house to Vanessa." I froze, champagne glass in hand. "Are you serious? I've been paying for that house this whole time." He just shrugged. "You offered. No one asked you to." That was the day my world tilted. I left quietly, no drama, no accusations. They thought everything was under control, but they had no idea what surprise was waiting for them next. Before I explain how I found out the home I was paying for was suddenly no longer ours, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt like your kindness was taken for granted, especially by your own family. I grew up in a quiet suburb just outside Seattle. Our house on Oak Ridge Lane wasn't fancy, but it held a lot of heart. It was a 2-story colonial with blue shutters, filled with laughter, routines, and memories. My dad, Alan, worked as an accountant for a mid-size firm, and my mom, Linda, taught 3rd grade at the local school. Our lives were steady: Sunday dinners, summer BBQs, and the kind of holiday traditions that didn't change much over time. Vanessa was born when I was 5, and even then I could feel a difference in how we were treated. I first noticed it on my 10th birthday. I'd asked for a sleepover party, but my parents said it had to be small, just 2 friends, because parties were too expensive. 3 months later, Vanessa's 6th birthday had a bounce house, a face painter, and 20 kids running around. At the time, I brushed it off. She was the younger one after all. But that wasn't the end of it. When I needed braces, I was told we should wait a year, supposedly for better insurance coverage. When Vanessa needed them, she got them right away. On my 18th birthdays, I received a few driving lessons. Vanessa's 18th came with a used, but reliable Toyota Corolla. Whenever I brought up the differences, my parents always had an explanation. Money was tight before, things were better now, or the one I heard most: "Your sister needs more support. You're so independent." That so-called independence wasn't something I was born with, it was something I had to build. By the time I hit high school, I knew that if I wanted anything, I'd have to work for it. I started babysitting at 14, then took a weekend job at the grocery store when I turned 18. During college breaks, I clocked in close to full-time hours. Meanwhile, Vanessa's main focus was school, and even that she barely managed. College widened the gap even more. I went to Crestwood College on a partial scholarship, juggling 2 part-time jobs to pay the rest. My parents helped a little, sending me what they called "what we can afford," about $1,800 per semester. But somehow, when it was Vanessa's turn, they covered full tuition for a private liberal arts college. "She's not as good with managing debt as you," they explained. "You'll be fine." Even with all that, I didn't hold it against them. I truly loved my family. I just assumed that was how things were, so I put my energy into building a life of my own. I majored in business with a concentration in real estate, right as the 2010 financial crisis hit. The housing market was a mess. A lot of my classmates gave up, but I didn't. I took a job as an admin assistant at a small agency and worked on getting my real estate license at night. Those early days were hard. I lived in a cramped studio with furniture I found secondhand, drove an old car that seemed to break down monthly, and survived on instant noodles and coffee. My first year selling homes? I closed just 2 deals, barely enough to keep myself afloat. My parents tried to help in their own way. A few home-cooked meals during visits and repeated reminders that I could always try something more secure. Things finally started to change in my 3rd year, when I landed a client who was downsizing from her lakefront home. She was thrilled with how I handled the sale, and she told her friends. Before long, I had a steady stream of referrals and was specializing in high-end properties. By 28, I was living in a modern loft in downtown Seattle, had a new car, and was considered one of the up-and-comers in the Seattle real estate scene. Vanessa, meanwhile, bounced between hobbies. After finishing her art history degree, she worked at a gallery for a short time, then decided it wasn't meaningful enough. She tried being a barista, then a personal assistant, and eventually settled on teaching yoga a few times a week at a trendy studio. Despite her inconsistent income, her lifestyle seemed pretty comfortable: brunches, weekend getaways, and an ever-growing closet. How? Simple. Our parents were still helping her. They paid her phone bill, stepped in to cover rent when she was short, and generally acted as her safety net. I noticed, of course, especially during family get-togethers. But I didn't say anything. I figured one day she'd have to figure things out on her own. Then came the first major shift. One evening, my dad called. His voice sounded off. He told me he'd just been laid off in a company-wide downsizing after spending 30 years at the same place. He was 61, and the severance package would only last about 8 months. Around the same time, my mom had started experiencing ongoing health issues. The treatments were expensive, and while her school insurance helped a bit, it didn't cover everything. "We're managing," he told me during one of our weekly phone calls. But I could hear how tired he sounded. 3 months later, I went over on a Sunday and noticed a stack of overdue bills on the kitchen counter while my mom was showing me her latest garden project. When I asked about it, they admitted they were behind on the mortgage. They hadn't told me sooner because they didn't want to burden me. "It's only temporary," my dad said. "Once I find a new job, we'll be back on track." But finding accounting roles for someone nearing retirement wasn't easy. And my mom's medical costs kept adding up. That night, I lay awake, turning over every possible option in my head. I made them a proposal. I told my parents I'd take care of their mortgage until things got back on track. I also offered to help cover the portion of mom's medical bills that insurance didn't handle. The look of relief on both their faces made it clear I'd made the right call. "This will still be your inheritance one day," my mom said tearfully. "This house will always belong to you. We'll never forget what you're doing for us, Claire." What started out as a short-term solution slowly became long-term. My dad's job hunt stretched from a few months into several years. He eventually picked up part-time consulting gigs that brought in a little money but without any benefits. Meanwhile, my mom scaled back her teaching schedule so she could better manage her health. Each month, I transferred the mortgage payment straight into their account, plus a little extra for things like groceries and utilities. During my regular visits, I helped around the house and drove them to appointments. Vanessa, however, seemed completely untouched by all of this. Her visits home grew fewer and farther between as she focused on her newest passion, yoga retreats and spiritual wellness workshops. When she did show up for holidays or family birthdays, she'd bring a small gift, smile for a few photos, and disappear. If she knew I was covering the bills, she never acknowledged it, not once. Everything shifted when Vanessa crossed paths with Trevor Blake at a charity gala she attended with one of her yoga clients. Trevor was the son of a well-known family that owned a string of car dealerships across the Pacific Northwest. He was immediately drawn to Vanessa's free-spirited charm and striking appearance. Their relationship took off fast. Suddenly, my sister's Instagram was filled with snapshots of high-end restaurants, weekend escapes on his family's private jet, and courtside seats at Bulls games. "He's not like the others," my mom said one afternoon, clearly thrilled. "He's so established and from a really good family." I couldn't help but notice that my parents suddenly seemed to have a lot more energy than before. They were going on shopping outings with Vanessa, hosting dinner parties when Trevor visited, even repainting the guest room, something they hadn't touched in years. It seemed like all the financial caution they clung to had vanished once Vanessa's exciting new relationship came into the picture. 8 months after they met, Trevor proposed with a diamond ring that likely cost more than I'd spent on their mortgage that entire year. Just like that, the wedding planning took over everything. The engagement party was held at the Blake Hill Reserve Club, an exclusive venue that usually hosted celebrities and public figures, not families like ours. It was my first real sign that something within our family dynamic was beginning to shift. The sprawling grounds, polished clubhouse, and high-end catering were worlds away from our usual gatherings. Yet my parents looked right at home, casually mingling with Trevor's family and confidently making introductions as though they'd been part of that world all along. I squeezed the event in between client showings and arrived solo. Despite how far I'd come professionally, I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't quite belong. While I usually felt sharp and self-assured in my tailored black dress, that night it seemed plain beside the sea of designer labels. "Claire, you made it," my mom called out, waving from a small circle of women I didn't recognize. She looked positively radiant, her cheeks flushed from champagne, her eyes glowing with excitement. As I approached, I caught the end of their conversation. "The wedding gift is going to be just perfect," my mom was saying. "Something they can really build their life around." The women nodded approvingly before moving along. I asked what she meant by wedding gift, and she simply patted my arm. "Oh, just tossing around ideas. Nothing decided yet. Have you tried the crab cakes? They're amazing." It was an obvious attempt to change the subject, but I didn't push. Still, throughout the evening, I caught multiple conversations between my parents and Trevor's family, quiet exchanges, warm smiles, and plenty of nodding. Whatever they were planning, I clearly wasn't part of it. 2 weeks later, my dad called and asked if I could temporarily increase my monthly support. The roof's starting to show some wear, he explained. We've got a contractor giving us a quote soon, and we'd like to get ahead of it before winter hits. I agreed right away and wired over an extra $2,500. But when I dropped by the next weekend unannounced, I didn't see any signs of roof work. No tools, no ladder, nothing. Instead, I walked in to find my mom and Vanessa sitting in the living room, surrounded by wedding magazines, fabric samples, and a half-finished bottle of champagne. "Oh, we're just brainstorming," my mom said quickly, sweeping some of the materials aside. "It's nothing over the top." But a catering estimate lying open on the coffee table told a different story. The cost per guest was more than most people spend on an entire night out. When I gently asked about financial priorities, my mom grew defensive. "This is Vanessa's big day," she insisted. "We've set aside savings specifically for this." "What savings?" I asked, knowing their situation as well as I did. "You wouldn't understand," my dad said from across the room. "Sometimes certain things are worth making sacrifices for." And with that, the conversation was over. Later that week, I had lunch with my best friend, Naomi Ellis. I pushed my salad around the plate, feeling uneasy. "Tell me if I'm out of line," I said. "I know it's their money, but am I wrong to feel uncomfortable about all this?" Naomi looked at me, her expression serious. "Except it's not just their money," she pointed out. "You've been covering their bills for years. Have they ever mentioned paying you back?" "That was never part of the deal," I admitted. I wasn't expecting anything in return. But I also didn't think they'd suddenly have thousands to spare for a high-end wedding. "It sounds like you've been enabling them," Naomi said gently. "Maybe it's time to think about setting some boundaries." I nodded, knowing Naomi was right. But even though I understood, the idea of bringing up money with my parents made me feel uneasy. After all, they'd raised me and supported me in their own way, and now they genuinely needed help. How could I suddenly place conditions on something that was supposed to come from the heart? As the wedding planning escalated, so did the strange contradictions around money. My parents turned down dinner invites, saying they were cutting back on expenses. Yet somehow they managed to pay for engagement photos taken at a luxury resort. My mom mentioned skipping some of her therapy sessions to save money, but in the next breath, she talked about the custom mother of the bride dress being tailored just for her. Even more troubling, I started noticing I was being left out of family events. Cake tastings, venue tours, Vanessa's bridal shower. I only found out about these things after the fact, either through casual mentions or posts on social media. When I asked why no one had included me, the answer was always something like, "We didn't want to bother you," or "We figured you were swamped with work." And still, every month, I kept covering the mortgage, the taxes, and a chunk of the medical bills. It added up fast, nearly $3,200 each month, money I had originally intended to invest in a second property. By that point, it had been 6 years since I started helping out, and my total contributions had passed $175,000. About 8 months before the wedding, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off a birthday gift for my mom. Their driveway was empty, but I saw lights on inside, so I let myself in using my key. "Hello," I called, stepping into the hallway. Voices went quiet in the dining room. When I turned the corner, I saw my parents sitting at the table with an older man in a suit. Papers were spread out in front of them. "Claire, we weren't expecting you," my mom said quickly, pulling the documents into a folder. "Sorry to interrupt," I said, holding out the gift. "Just came to drop this off for your birthday." "This is Mr. Whitaker," my dad said reluctantly. "He's our attorney, just helping us update some paperwork." "Mr. Whitaker" gave me a polite nod but didn't offer anything more. The silence in the room was thick until my mom suggested we have coffee in the kitchen. Clearly, they wanted to shift the conversation. While we waited for the coffee to brew, I noticed how fidgety she seemed, rearranging cups, wiping down already clean counters. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "There's nothing wrong legally, is there?" "Oh no," she replied quickly. "We're just getting things organized. It's important to have everything documented as we get older." Before I could ask more, my dad joined us, looking unusually upbeat. "Good news, Claire," he said. "You won't have to worry about the house for much longer." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" He smiled. "We're just making a few changes to simplify things. Nothing for you to worry about." From there, the conversation turned to lighter topics, local news, my latest home listings, updates on the wedding. But the vague comment stuck with me as I drove home. Something was clearly happening and I wasn't being told the whole story. Then the wedding day arrived, a beautiful June Saturday. The Westbrook Grand Hotel in downtown Seattle had been completely transformed. White roses filled every corner, sparkling chandeliers lit the ballroom, and the atmosphere felt straight out of a luxury magazine. I'd been there since early morning as part of the bridal party, helping manage the chaos of stylists, photographers, makeup artists, and Vanessa's nonstop emotional meltdowns. "The champagne isn't cold enough," she snapped, just as I was adjusting her veil. "And I asked for ivory roses, not cream." I bit back my response, remembering my mom's words that morning, "Please help her today go perfectly. This means everything to your sister." So I did what needed to be done. I fixed the champagne issue, calmed the bridesmaids, and found the planner to deal with the flower mix-up, all while keeping my practiced, professional smile. Still, behind that smile, I couldn't help doing mental math, calculating just how much all of this had cost. And how much I'd given. The ceremony itself was flawless. Vanessa looked stunning in her designer gown. Trevor seemed genuinely happy. As they said their vows, my parents sat proudly in the front row, Mom dabbing her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief, Dad beaming with pride. From the outside, we looked like the picture-perfect family. At the reception, I sat at the family table, nursing a single glass of champagne and making polite conversation with Trevor's extended relatives. But I could feel something in the air, something was coming. All throughout cocktail hour, I watched as my parents spoke quietly with Trevor's family. There were shared glances, subtle nods, and conversations I clearly wasn't part of. And then after dinner, my father stood up and tapped his glass. The room fell silent. He launched into a heartfelt speech, reflecting on watching Vanessa grow up and the pride they felt watching her begin this new chapter. He talked about the importance of strong roots, family values, and supporting the next generation. "And that's why," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "your mother and I have decided to give you our home as a wedding gift. The house where you were raised, the one filled with years of memories, is now yours to make new memories in." The room broke into applause. Nearby guests nodded with admiration, whispering about what a meaningful gesture it was. Vanessa gasped dramatically, clutching Trevor's arm as happy tears spilled down her face. My mother accepted congratulations with a smile, eyes misty. And me? I didn't move. I sat completely still, the champagne glass trembling slightly in my hand. 6 years. 60 monthly payments. All those extra contributions for repairs, insurance, taxes. And not once had they even hinted that they were planning to give away the house I'd been supporting. My mind raced through everything: Mom's teary thanks when I first offered to help. Dad's repeated promise that the house will be yours someday. All those weekends I'd spent painting walls, fixing leaks, handling the upkeep. And just like that, it was gone. I had always believed the house would one day be mine. Meanwhile, my sister breezed through life, only showing up for holidays and the occasional Sunday dinner. It took every ounce of self-control to keep it together during the wedding dinner. I raised my glass during toasts, posed for pictures, and even hugged Vanessa when she gushed about how incredible our parents' gift was. But once the music started and the crowd's focus shifted, I quietly gathered my things and slipped out a side exit. Instead of going home, I drove straight to what I used to consider my parents' house, though now I knew it belonged to my sister. I pulled into the driveway and waited, knowing they'd come back to change before heading to their downtown hotel. The house stood quietly in the dark, every shutter and brick a reminder of the years I'd invested in keeping it standing. They arrived just after midnight, still dressed in their formal wear. When they saw my car, their faces shifted from surprise to something closer to tired resignation. I stepped out as they walked toward the door. "Claire, why aren't you at the reception?" my mother asked, fumbling with her purse. "We need to talk," I said calmly, following them inside. We sat down in the living room, still full of wedding decorations and gift bags. And finally, I asked what had been eating at me all evening. "Why didn't you talk to me before making this decision about the house?" Without ever bringing it up with me. My dad loosened his tie and avoided my eyes. "It's still our house, Claire. We appreciated your help when things were tight, but legally, our name's the only one on the deed." "Oh, really? Was your name on the checks I sent every month for 6 years? Or on the receipts for the new roof? What about the property tax payments when you came up short? You chose to help, and we've always appreciated that. No one made you do it. You told me this was my future," I reminded them. "You said I was investing in something that would one day be mine." My dad let out a heavy sigh. "Plans change. Vanessa and Trevor need a stable home to build their life. They just can't afford anything similar in this neighborhood. And I can. I asked, stunned. I've put off my own goals to support you. You already have your career and your loft in downtown Seattle, my mom replied. Vanessa needs a solid start. From that point on, the conversation unraveled. Every explanation they offered chipped away at what little trust remained. They had transferred the deed 2 months earlier. That mystery meeting with the attorney suddenly made sense. And they'd used my latest contributions, about $14,200 I'd sent for medical expenses and home repairs. My financial help was used to complete the mortgage payments. What hurt most wasn't just the money. It was how easily they dismissed my efforts, as if everything I'd done was just a kind favor, not a commitment based on promises. When I brought up the total, over $175,000, my dad actually scoffed. That sounds like an exaggeration. And even if it's not, that's just what families do. We help each other. I looked at him and said quietly, seems like that only applies when Vanessa needs help. I grabbed my purse. I need to stop offering financial help for now. I drove home in silence. I drove home, feeling completely overwhelmed as I made my way back. I was shaken and disappointed. That night shattered any illusion I'd held about being seen as an equal in the family. To them, I'd never been the one who needed support. I was the dependable one, the one who was already doing fine, the one they assumed would always be okay. That night, curled up on my couch with the skyline in view, I realized I needed to rethink everything I believed about my family and my role in it. The week after the wedding felt like a blur. Work appointments filled my days, and I let every call from my parents go to voicemail. At first they rang daily, then less often. Their messages shifted from warm concern to subtle frustration. Vanessa texted me once, thanking me for being part of her big day. Not a single word about the house. I didn't respond. I needed time to breathe, to think, to figure out what came next. Work became my refuge. I packed my schedule with back-to-back showings, took on open houses every weekend, and even volunteered for listings no one else wanted. My coworkers noticed the change. You going on a big vacation or something? One of them joked. I laughed it off, saying I was just trying to stay ahead. But every house I stepped into reminded me of the one I poured my savings into, now given away like it meant nothing. Nights were harder. Sleep didn't come easy. I'd lie awake calculating what I'd lost over the years. Opportunities missed, investments delayed, retirement savings reduced. Also, I could keep up those monthly contributions. One night, unable to sleep, I opened my laptop and made a spreadsheet. Line by line, I documented every dollar I'd spent, mortgage payments, taxes, repairs, medical costs, even groceries and utilities. By the time I finished, the total was more than $180,000 over 6 years. Seeing it laid out like that brought me clarity. I needed professional guidance. That Monday morning, I met with Evelyn Grant, a financial advisor a colleague had recommended. She reviewed my spreadsheet with a calm, professional expression, though her questions hinted at what she was really thinking. Was there any written agreement around these payments? Nothing official, I admitted. It was all based on what they told me, that I was investing in something that would one day belong to me. They said it more than once. She nodded while jotting down a few notes. Without any written agreement, this situation falls. There was no written agreement, which made things complicated, she explained. You could possibly explore. There could be legal complications, but I didn't want to go down that road. I felt like I had given so much without getting the fairness I expected, but taking that route with family can be both costly and emotionally exhausting. What would you suggest I do? I asked. To be honest, she said gently, treat it as a hard but valuable lesson about keeping finances and family separate when there's no formal paperwork. Stop all financial help immediately. Protect what you've built. And think carefully about the kind of relationship you want moving forward with clear boundaries. It wasn't easy advice to accept, but it gave me much needed clarity. That evening, I sat down and wrote a comprehensive email to my parents. I listed every payment I'd made over the years, laid out what I had believed was our understanding, and made it clear that I would no longer be offering any financial support. The message was written like a business memo, calm, factual, and final. I wasn't trying to open a discussion. I was drawing a line. Their response came within hours, a long emotional message that swung between defensive explanations and subtle guilt-tripping. Most of it was from my mother. She emphasized Vanessa's needs compared to my supposed stability, reminded me how much they'd done for me growing up, and they hoped I would reconsider distancing myself. My father added a short paragraph of his own, expressing disappointment that I viewed a relationship in such a transactional way. Nowhere in the message did they acknowledge the breach of trust. They didn't mention the financial reality of what they'd done or show any intention of making things right. Reading between the lines, it was clear they seemed to assume things would continue without changes, of course, but with my emotional availability still intact. That email confirmed what I already suspected. Nothing would change unless I changed it myself. Meanwhile, Vanessa and Trevor moved in right after returning from their honeymoon in Bali. Her social media quickly filled with updates on renovations, tearing out the kitchen my parents had used for decades, replacing the garden my mother once lovingly tended with a hot tub and an outdoor kitchen, painting over the growth chart in the laundry room that had both our childhood heights marked on it. Every photo felt like another piece of my connection to that house being erased. The hardest moment came 3 weeks after the wedding, a bright, casual text from Vanessa, complete with photos. "We're making big changes to your old room. Want to come see before the contractors get started?" Naomi, my close friend, was a huge help during this time. We met regularly for coffee, and her steady presence helped ground me. When I showed her Vanessa's message, she took my phone, blocked my sister's number, and handed it back without saying a word. Then she added, "That's not what you need right now." She was absolutely right. Distance was the only thing keeping me emotionally intact as I tried to rebuild how I viewed my family dynamics. I stuck to my no-contact approach through June and into July, turning my energy toward getting my finances in order and reconnecting with the friends I'd set aside while trying to keep up with family obligations. Then came the phone call that ended the silence. It was my dad calling from his office number, one I hadn't blocked. He left a voicemail that sounded carefully casual. "Claire, it's Dad. Hope all is well. Your mom and I have been thinking about our living situation. The house is really too big for us now, and Vanessa and Trevor are ready for their own space. We're exploring a few options for the next few months. Let's catch up soon." There was no apology, no mention of what had happened, just a subtle suggestion that they were considering a change and might need help. I didn't respond, but the voicemail lingered in my thoughts. Had they truly not planned for where they would go after handing over the house? Were they actually being asked to leave? A week later, another message came, this time from my mom. "Sweetheart, it's been ages since we've heard from you. We're having a small family dinner Sunday and would love for you to come. We have a few things we'd like to talk about, some future plans." Again, no acknowledgement of the recent tension. Just an assumption that I'd show up like I always used to. I replied with a polite text, saying I had work obligations and wouldn't be able to make it. That short exchange opened the door to more messages. They began hinting at their living situation becoming temporary, suggesting, without directly saying it, that they might need a place to stay. Eventually, the implication was obvious. They were expecting to move into my Vermont cottage on Lake Hartwell. The cottage had been one of my proudest accomplishments. I bought it the year before as a peaceful getaway spot and rental investment. It had been fully funded through commissions from one of my best-performing quarters. I'd never actually told them they couldn't use it, and truthfully, before the whole situation with the house, I'd thought about offering it to them as a retirement option. But now? The fact they just assumed it would be available to them felt like another example of them claiming my hard work without ever asking. The direct request finally came one Tuesday evening when they showed up at my loft in downtown Seattle without notice. The doorman called up to let me know they were downstairs. For a second, I thought about saying no. But I realized avoiding it wouldn't change anything, it would only push the inevitable down the road. So I agreed to let them in. They arrived holding peace offerings, my mom's homemade lasagna and a bottle of wine we'd once shared during a joyful Christmas years ago. The familiarity stirred memories I wasn't ready for. I led them to the dining area but didn't offer to take their coats, a quiet signal that this wasn't a friendly visit. After some small talk about the weather and changes in the neighborhood, my dad cleared his throat. "Claire, we wanted to talk about our situation. As you know, the house now belongs to Vanessa and Trevor, and they're understandably ready to settle in on their own. They've asked us to move out by the end of the month," my mom added, as if that request was somehow unfair, despite being made 2 months after they gave the house away. "We've looked at a few places," my dad continued, "but rent in nice areas is shockingly high. And with your mom's health needs, we're trying to find something that's both comfortable and accessible." I said nothing, waiting. I wasn't going to make it easier for them by offering a solution. We were thinking, my mom finally said, about your cottage on Lake Hartwell. It's empty most of the time, and honestly, the setting would be perfect for your father's health. The doctor said a calmer setting would be really beneficial, my mom added, as if that settled everything. For a moment, I was stunned into silence. After weeks of no real communication, and after what had happened, they just showed up, assuming they'd be welcome to move into my second home. No apology. No acknowledgement of the hurt they'd caused. No mention of the boundaries I'd set. Not even a direct question. Just a quiet confidence that they were entitled to it. The cottage on Lake Hartwell? I repeated slowly. Just until we figure something out long term, my dad added quickly. 8 months, maybe a year at most. We wouldn't interfere with any plans you have to rent it out during peak season. I thought about what that house meant to me. A cozy 3-bedroom place on a small lake in Vermont. I'd paid for it completely with my own money I saved through years of careful planning. I'd spent weekends painting, fixing things, and furnishing it with pieces I'd chosen with care. The rental income helped balance out slow seasons in real estate. More than that, it was my personal escape, a peaceful space I built for myself. That won't be possible, I said at last. My mom blinked, clearly confused. What do you mean? I mean, no. You can't stay at the cottage on Lake Hartwell. But it's empty most of the time, she insisted, as if I hadn't grasped the logic. That's not the point, I said calmly. It's my property. I paid for it. And I'm not interested in changing how it's being used. My father leaned in slightly, his brow furrowed. Claire, there's no need to be dramatic. We're just talking about family helping family. We've always tried to support you in our own way. That was the moment his words cracked through my calm. Everything you've done for me? What about what I've done for you? I paid the mortgage. I covered taxes and repairs. For 6 years. And I did it under the impression that I was investing in something that would eventually be mine. And yet, I added, you handed it all to Vanessa without ever speaking to me about it. That's in the past now, my mother said with a dismissive wave. What matters is finding a solution for the present. The solution is simple, I replied. You find a place you can afford. Just like any other adults in your position would do. They exchanged glances, clearly not expecting this kind of pushback. My dad softened his tone the same way he did when trying to smooth things over. Look, I understand you're still upset about the house. But this is different. We're not asking you to give us the cottage on Lake Hartwell. Just let us stay there temporarily. I stood up, signaling the end of the discussion. I need time to think about this, I said. I'll let you know my decision later this week. As soon as they left, I called Naomi. She showed up 30 minutes later with backup, our friend Simone, and a bottle of tequila. As I recounted the whole interaction, their expressions shifted from disbelief to frustration. The nerve, Naomi said, pouring us each a drink. They gave away the house you paid for. And now they want to move into your vacation home? How is that even real? Simone nodded. My dad pulled something similar after my parents split. He gave their savings to my brother for his startup, then tried to crash at my place when he couldn't pay rent. These patterns don't stop unless you draw a line. Exactly, Naomi added. And it needs to be a firm one. Clear boundaries with consequences they actually take seriously. Together, we wrote a response, direct but respectful. I made it clear I recognized their situation, but it wasn't mine to fix. The key points were simple. I wouldn't be offering the cottage on Lake Hartwell, even temporarily. I wouldn't be providing any more financial help. Any future relationship would require acknowledgement of what had happened and steps toward rebuilding trust. 3 days later, I agreed to meet my parents at a Cornerstone cafe. I chose the location carefully, public but private enough. I wanted to reduce the chances. It was an emotional moment. I arrived early and found a quiet table in the corner. I was dressed professionally and brought notes, setting the tone that this wasn't a casual family catch-up. They came in together. My mom looked around nervously while my dad wore his usual confident expression. After brief greetings, I got right to the point. I've thought about your request, I said, and my answer is no. I won't be offering the cottage on Lake Hartwell as a place for you to live short-term or long-term. My mother's expression dropped. But where are we supposed to go? That's something you should have considered before handing over your home, I said, keeping my voice steady. There are plenty of affordable apartments out there, especially if you expand your search beyond the city. My father's tone hardened. We raised you better than this. Families take care of each other. I agree, I replied. Which is why for 6 years I took care of mine. I paid your mortgage, your property taxes, and medical expenses. That ended the moment you gave the house away, after using my money to clear the last of the balance for Vanessa's benefit. I slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed listings for rentals that matched their budget, along with a few options for senior communities that included health amenities. These are all available now, I said. And they match your income level. My mother pushed the folder aside without even opening it. We're not seniors, she said sharply. We're your parents, and we need your help during a transition period. A transition you created, I replied, when you gave away the stable housing you already had. I'm setting a boundary, I continued firmly. I will not provide you with housing, and I won't be resuming any financial support. Any future relationship will depend on your acknowledgement of how your choices affected me and your willingness to make things right. My father's expression had darkened throughout my explanation. So that's it? It feels like you're distancing yourself from us over money. This isn't about money, I said evenly. It's about respect, about consideration, and about honesty, all of which were missing when you made decisions that directly impacted me without any discussion. The conversation dragged on another 20 minutes, following the same old script. They downplayed my feelings, emphasized family duty, and tried to spin their choices as normal parental decisions. I stood my ground, calm but unwavering. Eventually, I rose to my feet to end the meeting. My decision is final. I hope you're able to find housing that suits your needs. The fallout began almost immediately. That evening, Vanessa called from a new number, one I hadn't blocked. Her voice shook with frustration as she said I wasn't being as supportive as they expected and being jealous of her happiness. When I tried to explain how I saw things, she cut me off. Trevor and I would never treat family this way, she said sharply, and then ended the call. Soon after, extended relatives started weighing in. My parents had shared their carefully curated version of events, and suddenly, aunts and uncles who'd barely spoken to me before were messaging to question my character and remind me of family loyalty. Cousins I rarely interacted with posted vague comments on social media about supporting your parents in their later years, clearly directed at me. I responded only once. I sent a group email outlining 6 years of financial support and explaining the circumstances around the house transfer. I ended it by asking for privacy and made it clear that I wouldn't be discussing the matter any further. Then I blocked numbers, muted accounts, and shifted my focus to rebuilding on my own terms without guilt or pressure. The emotional weight was heavy at first. But with each passing day, things became clearer. I began to see just how many unhealthy patterns I had accepted over the years. For the first time, I was putting my own well-being above others' demands, and despite how hard it was, it felt like finally coming up for air after being underwater for far too long. 2 months went by with very little contact. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned my parents had found a 2-bedroom apartment in a suburb about 20 minutes from their old neighborhood. Vanessa's renovation update slowed down, suggesting the excitement had started to fade once reality set in. Meanwhile, my own life began to stabilize. I spent more time at the cottage on Lake Hartwell, using it as the retreat I'd always intended. I rekindled friendships that had faded under the weight of family obligations. I put new energy into my work. With the pressure lifted, I rediscovered things I'd set aside, like taking weekend painting classes, joining a book club, and even dating casually for the first time in years. My therapy sessions shifted from coping to growing. I started noticing how family dynamics had shaped my behavior, my tendency to overextend myself, my struggle with boundaries, and the habit of always putting others first. My career kept moving forward. In September, I secured a high-profile listing, a historic mansion being converted into luxury loft in downtown Seattle. It was a competitive project, and landing it would significantly increase my income for the year. It was proof that I'd made the right decision by prioritizing my goals instead of continuing to fund a dynamic that didn't serve me. Then one brisk October morning, while I was reviewing marketing materials in my downtown office, my assistant knocked gently. "There's a Alan Morgan here to see you," she said. "He doesn't have an appointment. Says he's your father." My first instinct was to say no. But something about her face made me hesitate. "How does he seem?" I asked. She paused. Nervous, maybe a little sad. "He said he understands if you're busy, but he was hoping you might have time for lunch." The surprise of it threw me off. My father usually preferred phone calls, especially when things were difficult. If he'd come in person, it meant something more. "Tell him I can give him 35 minutes, I said. "If we need more time, we'll go to lunch." He entered cautiously, and I noticed he looked older than I remembered. His typically sharp appearance was slightly off, his shirt a little wrinkled, hair not as neatly styled, and new lines around his eyes. He carried a small gift bag, which he placed gently on my desk. Your mom's brownies, he said with a hesitant smile. She remembered they're your favorite. I thanked him but didn't touch the bag. Instead, I gestured to the chair opposite me. This was unexpected. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while, he said as he sat down, his hands fidgeting more than usual. But I wasn't sure you'd take the call. Things haven't been right since the wedding, he added. No, I said, keeping my voice neutral. They haven't. He took a deep breath. I came to apologize, Claire. I made serious mistakes. And I know I hurt you. I need to take ownership of that. His directness caught me off guard. My dad rarely admitted to being wrong. He typically reframed situations to protect his viewpoint. I said nothing, giving him space to continue. The way we handled the house, it was completely wrong, he said quietly. You should have been consulted. You should have been shown appreciation for everything you did. And instead, we left you out. We ignored your feelings. Then he paused. I looked at him and asked the question that had been sitting inside me for months. Why? He let out a long sigh. The short answer is your mother drove most of the decision and I didn't have the courage to stop it. The longer explanation is more complicated. Over the next hour, my father shared details I hadn't known. He explained how my mother had always favored Vanessa, seeing in her the kind of social success she had longed for herself. When Trevor entered the picture with his family's wealth and status, my mother became focused on locking in the relationship. She was convinced that giving them a significant wedding gift would impress his family and help secure Vanessa's place. I knew it wasn't right, my father admitted. Especially considering everything you'd done for us. I tried suggesting alternatives, helping them with a down payment, offering support in other ways that wouldn't touch your inheritance, but your mother was set on giving them the family home. To her, it symbolized status. And you agreed to it, I said quietly. I did, he said, nodding. That's completely on me. His voice cracked a little. I've spent my life avoiding conflict with your mother, even when it meant being unfair to you. That's not new. It goes back to when you were a child. I just didn't know how to break the pattern. Hearing the truth was both painful and validating. All those years I'd felt overlooked weren't just in my head. The favoritism had been deliberate, not just circumstantial. So what's changed now? I asked. Why apologize after months of silence? A few things, he replied. Living in the apartment gave me some perspective on what we lost and more importantly what we took from you. Vanessa and Trevor are already facing problems, and it's made me question whether the sacrifice was worth it. He hesitated before adding, and I've started therapy. On my own. It's helped me recognize patterns I didn't see before. He reached toward me, not quite touching my hand but closing the space between us. I'm not asking for instant forgiveness, Claire, he said softly. What we did caused real harm. I just want you to know I see that now. And I'm trying to do better. The lunch that followed felt different, like I was speaking with someone new. He asked about my work, my friends, and my interests, topics he'd rarely paid attention to before. He talked about his part-time consulting gigs and the community events he joined at their new apartment. For the first time, he mentioned going to social gatherings without my mother, something I'd never seen him do. There was a new independence in him, one that hadn't existed before. As we finished eating, I asked the question that had been on my mind. What about Mom? Does she feel the same way you do about what happened? His expression tightened slightly. Not entirely. She agrees that we didn't handle it well, but she still believes the decision itself was the right one. She's having a hard time with the consequences, downsizing and your distance. I can't have a relationship with her unless she acknowledges the real issue. I understand, he said. I'm trying to talk to her about it, but her journey is her own. I'm here because I want to make things right, regardless of what she chooses to do. We left that day with a tentative plan to meet once a month for lunch. A small but meaningful step toward rebuilding trust, without rushing into anything deeper. As I watched him leave, his posture more upright than when he arrived, I felt a mix of emotions. There was still hurt, but also a cautious sense of hope that change, however slow, might actually be possible. 2 weeks later, my mother reached out. Not with an emotional apology like my father's, but with a formal invitation to lunch at her favorite restaurant. I agreed with clear boundaries. No talk about money. No expectations about family roles. Just a chance to begin addressing the distance between us. The lunch wasn't easy. My mother showed up polished and poised as always. Her greeting was warm but controlled, none of the openness my father had shown. "Your father says I need to acknowledge the misunderstanding about the house," she said, once we had placed our orders. "It wasn't a misunderstanding," I replied gently. "It was a breach of trust, and it erased everything I had contributed." She winced slightly but continued. "Maybe we didn't handle it as clearly as we should have. For that I'm sorry." The words were technically right, but the emotion behind them felt lacking. Throughout the meal, she stuck to her belief that giving Vanessa the house had been the correct decision, just one that hadn't been handled well. She admitted my feelings were hurt, but didn't go so far as to accept responsibility for causing that hurt. "Families go through rough patches," she said as we finished dessert. "I hope we can move forward now." It wasn't the reconciliation I had hoped for, but it was something. She had, in her own limited way, made an attempt to repair the relationship. I could acknowledge that while continuing to protect my boundaries and deciding for myself whether true healing was possible. Meanwhile, cracks had started to show in Vanessa's seemingly perfect life. The excited renovation posts on social media had slowed, replaced by vague messages about challenges and growing through difficult times. A mutual acquaintance casually mentioned overhearing raised voices during a dinner party at their house. And then came the photo, Trevor at a charity event, smiling beside his former girlfriend. Vanessa was nowhere in sight. The house itself had started to show clear signs of neglect. One evening, driven by curiosity, I took a drive past it. The paint on the shutters was peeling, the landscaping was overgrown, and one of the gutters hung loose, clearly damaged and left unrepaired for some time. It was hard not to notice the contrast. This was the same home that had been carefully maintained for years with plenty of help from me, and now it was visibly deteriorating under Vanessa's care. I didn't feel satisfaction seeing it that way. But it did provide context for what my father shared during our next meeting at a local cafe. Over coffee, he mentioned that Trevor's family started facing serious financial scrutiny, which had started creating financial tension in the marriage. "They're arguing a lot about money," he said. Vanessa assumed Trevor's family would cover the renovation costs, but that support vanished when the legal problem surfaced. Now they're left with mounting contractor bills and limited funds. "That's unfortunate," I said, keeping my tone neutral. He nodded. "Your mother's finally seeing things more clearly." She built up this picture in her head, Vanessa marrying into security and ease. But now she's watching that vision fall apart. And realizing too late what she gave up to make it happen. That helped explain the unexpected voicemail I received from my mother the following week. Her voice was soft and emotional as she asked if we could talk again. The conversation that followed, while still cautious, held something new. Her first real acknowledgement that she had made a mistake. I convinced myself that helping Vanessa build her future was worth the cost, she admitted. But I didn't let myself see how unfair it was to you. "I'm truly sorry." The words I'd waited months to hear finally arrived. They mattered, though they didn't bring instant healing. Real trust would take time and effort to rebuild. Still, that moment reopened a door I had once closed for good. For the first time, I could picture a relationship with my parents grounded in mutual respect, rather than duty and sacrifice. 8 months after the wedding that had fractured everything, I stood in the entryway of my newly purchased home in Greenhaven. It was a charming 3-bedroom craftsman that had needed a lot of renovation, but now reflected my style perfectly: warm tones, modern touches blended with classic architecture, and plenty of space for entertaining or simply being still. Buying that house wasn't just a career milestone. It was a declaration. I was done waiting for a promised inheritance. I was building my own legacy. The down payment came from my commission on the historic mansion loft in downtown Seattle project, which had exceeded expectations. That success also led to a promotion, senior partner at the firm, bringing with it both financial stability and professional validation. My cottage on Lake Hartwell had evolved too. Once just a smart investment with occasional personal use, it had become my true sanctuary during all the family turmoil. What started as weekend visits turned into longer stays when work slowed down. I added a home office, personalized the decor beyond rental basics, and got to know the year-round neighbors, many of whom became friends. Most importantly, my social world flourished without the constant demands of family. Weekly dinners with Naomi turned into regular get-togethers with a broader group of supportive, like-minded people. I joined professional associations I'd once neglected and built a solid network of peers who respected my work and encouraged my growth. Therapy remained a cornerstone of my progress. Over time, I began to understand long-held patterns, the way I took on too much responsibility, struggled to express my own needs, and habitually prioritized others' comfort over my own. As awareness grew, so did change. I practiced setting clear limits. I learned to say what I needed without guilt. And I allowed others to show up for me instead of always being the one holding things together. My relationship with my parents took on a new form, structured and intentional. Monthly lunches with my dad became something I looked forward to. His efforts to listen and understand allowed for real connection, not just small talk. He continued with therapy, and as he became more independent, our relationship began to shift from parent-child patterns to something healthier, two adults meeting in the middle. Things with my mother were more complicated. After her emotional moment, progress stalled. She had trouble fully owning the damage caused by years of clear favoritism. Our communication stayed limited, occasional lunches and brief phone calls with strong boundaries about what was and wasn't open for discussion. Even though the distance was hard, it was necessary for my peace of mind. And I still held hope that we might one day go deeper if she was willing to do the work. Vanessa and I maintained minimal contact. Months after our last interaction, she texted to ask if I'd meet for coffee to clear the air. The conversation that followed showed little growth on her part. She still didn't grasp the full impact of her role in the family dynamic. But she did at least acknowledge that I had valid reasons to feel wronged about the house. After that, we settled into distant civility, birthday texts, holiday greetings, but no illusion of closeness. Her relationship with Trevor continued to strain. As the legal issues around his family worsened, their lifestyle began to shift. They scaled back significantly, which created even more pressure between them. The house, once their prize, became more burden than blessing. Too expensive to maintain. Too symbolic to sell without admitting things had gone wrong. Her social media presence faded. The carefully curated updates slowed, and when she did post, the joy looked noticeably forced. Then one warm spring afternoon, I received an unexpected email from my mother. It wasn't a short message or a vague request, it was a thoughtful, reflective letter. She wrote about recognizing patterns from her own childhood that she had repeated unknowingly. She acknowledged the harm her favoritism had caused and expressed real regret about the way the house situation was handled. I told myself I was doing what was best for the family, she wrote, but in truth, I was protecting an image of what I wanted our family to be. That vision cost me my connection with my remarkable older daughter. A cost I now understand was far too great. The message closed with an invitation. Would I consider family therapy? Not as a way to undo the past, but as a path toward healthier relationships in the future. After speaking with my own therapist, I agreed to give it a try. Cautious hope, guided by solid boundaries, that's how I moved forward. Our first session turned out to be more productive than I expected. With guidance from a professional, my father was able to expand on insights he gained through his individual therapy. My mother listened without interrupting, without getting defensive for perhaps the first time in our relationship. And I spoke openly about long-buried feelings, expressing them without minimizing their importance or letting them turn into overwhelming anger. We left with assigned homework, communication exercises, reflection questions, and a shared commitment to keep showing up for the process. Progress came slowly and not always steadily. Some sessions led to real breakthroughs. Others slipped back into old patterns and required the therapist to gently redirect us. But over time, a new understanding began to take shape. My parents gradually acknowledged the full weight of their actions. And I started to see the nuances in their choices, not just favoritism, but deeper motivations shaped by their own experiences. Together, we worked toward healthier ways of relating, ways that honored the boundaries I had put in place. As my family life slowly began to repair itself, my personal life started flourishing too. A casual introduction through a colleague led me to Adam Reynolds, an architectural photographer whose work naturally complemented my real estate background. From the beginning, our relationship felt refreshingly straightforward. We communicated openly, respected each other's professional priorities, and shared a quiet preference for calm nights and overcrowded social events. What stood out most was Adam's respect for my boundaries. When I explained the complicated situation with my family and why certain boundaries were essential for me, he simply listened without judgment or pressure. He had gone through his own difficult family dynamics, which gave him a natural empathy. At the same time, his healthy relationship with his parents offered a glimpse of what balanced, respectful family connections could look like. By the following Christmas, 2 years after the wedding that had torn everything apart, we had built a new normal. We hosted holiday dinner at my home. Not at my parents' apartment, and not at Vanessa's house, neutral ground that felt safe and intentional. Gifts were modest and thoughtful, not extravagant. Conversations stayed within healthy limits. We avoided topics that might reopen old wounds. Vanessa and Trevor attended, though their dynamic was strained despite efforts at holiday cheer. The house that had once been the symbol of so much tension was now listed for sale, their marriage under pressure from financial strain and deeper unresolved issues. No one said it out loud, but my father's quiet glance across the table said everything. Some lessons are only learned after it's too late. Looking back, I understand now that the house was never really the issue. It simply magnified patterns that had existed all along: the unequal expectations, the tendency to dismiss my needs in favor of my sister's comfort. It took something that painful to bring those dynamics into the open. And that confrontation, though deeply difficult, was also a turning point. It created space for healing and growth that might never have happened otherwise. The biggest lesson didn't arrive all at once, but gradually. Real family connections can't be bought through financial support or preserved by obligation alone. They're built on mutual respect, open communication, and valuing people for who they are, not just for what they can provide. My willingness to financially support my parents had given the illusion of closeness. But that illusion fell apart when tested by competing interests. Equally important, I learned that boundaries aren't signs of selfishness, they're necessary for healthy relationships. By being clear about what I would and wouldn't accept, I created space for actual healing, not just surface-level reconciliation. Those boundaries helped me maintain a relationship with my parents while still protecting myself from being drawn back into the old patterns. And in the long run, that balance benefited all of us. Perhaps the most powerful realization of all was that I could stand up for myself without letting go of compassion. I could hold others accountable while still trying to understand where they were coming from. Yes, their actions caused harm, but recognizing the complex roots behind them helped me move toward forgiveness without forgetting the importance of responsibility. Now, as I shape my life with purpose instead of obligation, I see that family relationships, like any relationship, require ongoing care. They don't stay strong just because of shared history. They need attention, honesty, and effort. That understanding now influences every part of my life, from friendships and partnerships to work relationships. The journey isn't perfect. I still run into setbacks. Some family gatherings bring up old emotions. Some conversations tread carefully around sensitive ground. But the foundation has changed. I no longer sacrifice myself to keep the peace. I seek balanced reciprocity, spaces where everyone's needs matter. If anything in my story feels familiar, I invite you to take a closer look at the unspoken rules in your own family. Are you giving out of love or out of obligation? Are your efforts recognized and appreciated? Or are they expected without question? Do your family dynamics allow you to grow, or do they hold you back? Sometimes asking those questions can help you see patterns worth addressing before they lead to the kind of painful moment that forces a reckoning. What family expectations have you struggled with? Have you ever needed to draw a difficult line with someone you love? Share your experiences in the comments. I'd love to hear them. And if this story helped you reflect on your own life, please like and subscribe for more conversations around personal growth and family relationships. Remember, putting your well-being first isn't selfish. It's how you build meaningful, healthy connections with others and with yourself. Thanks for being here with me on this journey.